Guitar tips, just the tips, just for you. Guitar tips. Hello, and welcome to Guitar Tips. My name is Adam Levy. This is my weekly video blog that I do. I post a new tip right here on this YouTube channel each and every Friday. They are usually just short little tidbits. They might be as short as 5 minutes. They could be 10 minutes. There's a couple that are as long as 20. And so there's no hard and fast rule, but that's about the size of a guitar tip. And I mentioned this now. Of course, you may be a regular here, so you might be fast forwarding through this. But there's always new people here, so I just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page, as it were. So, yeah, Guitar Tips is not meant to be guitar lessons. Maybe at some point I will offer a more, complete kind of course sort of thing related to guitar tips, but right now Guitar Tips is just little ideas that you can think about as you're practicing or on stage or getting ready to be on stage or wherever you're at when you're thinking about the guitar. So that's what Guitar Tips is. And so each week I pick one little thing to focus on, and I'll get to what that thing is this week. But I want to mention first the Martin Guitar String Company. I guess it's the Martin Guitar Company, and they make strings. Anyway, I love their acoustic guitar strings. You may notice that this is not an acoustic guitar. It is a guitar that has acoustic properties, but it's essentially an electric guitar, and so I don't put Martin acoustic guitar strings on this guitar. But when I am playing any of my steel string guitars, I string them up with Martin retro strings, light gauge with a 12 on top. I like the retros because the winding on the wound strings is some kind of nickel. In other words, it looks kind of like dull silver. It's not bronze or phosphor bronze or brass. There's no yellowy, orangey metal in there. It's just nickel. And I find that to be kind of warm and even really nice for recording. And so thank you to Martin Strings for being a sponsor of this show. I guess it's a show. It's a show. Welcome to the show. Okay, on with the show. This week's guitar tip is bend in tune. Bend in tune. As many of my guitar tips, as is the case with many of my guitar tips here, this one came from an actual lesson with an actual student, not online as we are now, but just face-to-face giving a guitar lesson. And one of my students was really going for it in a kind of really expressive way on his guitar, and it was great to listen to most of the time. But here and there would be notes that just really would not be in tune. And it's the kind of thing, it's a really easy mistake to make, to be bending out of tune. It's easy to make that mistake for one reason, because a lot of us practice without any kind of pitch reference. In other words, if you're just sitting in your practice room and bending away, you don't necessarily know that the note that you arrive on at the top of your bend is in tune, because you're not referencing anything. So that's one cause of things not being in tune. Is just we don't in tune compared to what. So one way that you can practice bending in tune is to just put on a record that you like, and make sure, not all records are recorded exactly at A440. So make sure that your guitar is generally in tune with whatever recording you are going to play along with, so that you're in tune even before you start bending. That may require you tuning all the strings up a tiny bit or down a tiny bit, or a lot. Just depends on what recording you're playing along with. But so that's one way, is to play along with recorded music. Another way is to just, if you have an electronic keyboard handy in your music space, find the note of whatever key you want to play in, and just put something heavy on that key. Maybe you have a padlock, or some small thing that could just hold down one key. Maybe you could use a piece of Scotch tape or something to hold it down. That's a way to do it. Another way to do it is if you have a looping pedal. You could record yourself playing something. It could be something in rhythm. It could be a groove, and you could loop it. I don't have a looping pedal, so if you're waiting for me to hit a button and take my hands off the guitar, that's not going to happen today. But if you have a looping pedal, that's something you could do. You could loop in time and get a groove going. You could also do it out of time and just kind of get a droney thing going, and just get some strings going. I'm in G right now, and so I'm just kind of hitting various D's and G's to kind of get, well, I hit an extra note there, but just to kind of get a kind of root fifth drone thing going. And you could loop, whatever, 10 seconds of that or 20 seconds of that. And then just practice some bending exercises in the key of G or G major, or any of the modes related to a G root. So G Dorian, G Phrygian, or whatever. So those are some things that you could do. You can also use the guitar itself to practice bending, and I'll show you an exercise that I do sometimes. I will preface this by saying I'm not very warmed up. I had a good long gig last night. I played a 3-hour gig with no break, so a lot of hands on the guitar, hands on the strings. And I'm really just getting to the guitar for the first time today, so I'm a little bit warmed up. I mean, a little bit not warmed up. I'm not warmed up at all, I'll say that. And maybe that's where you're at, and so we're on, that's where we're at. This would be a better thing to do once you are warmed up. That's the important point that I missed saying. Yeah, I would recommend that you do warm up for 5, 10, 15 minutes or so before you start doing these exercises. But I'm going to be brave or foolish or whatever, and just try and do some of this stuff. So one thing that I will do is to practice bending in tune is unison, bending one string to get in unison with a string that is not bent. So here we're in the key of G, so maybe I'll use the top 2 strings, and I'll play the G here on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, and try and bend the note that would be F, that's at the 6th fret, and bend if it's not quite in tune, you hear this kind of pulsing sound that's called beating. And when that finally dissolves, then the 2 notes are in tune, and then you'd relax and do it again. A note about the actual mechanics of bending. I know people do it differently, but generally for me, I'm thinking about pushing in and up, so kind of into the wood, which you can't actually do, but I'm pressing in just the idea of pressing in and then up. So it's not just strictly up, but kind of in and up, and that gives me a little more strength. Also, I'm using all of my fingers here. Like the note that's bending is with my pinky, but I'm supporting it with middle and ring. So I'm getting them all to do the work. And of course, you could have some kind of G thing droning. You could be playing along with a record that's in the key of G. You could have your loop pedal thing going. And then I would maybe just go up the G major scale and do all the bends to those notes. And then now here we have a half step. I'm bending B up to C. So B up to C and back down. And then there'd be a half step here. Now I've got a little bit of reverb going, but depending on what you're doing and where your ears are at, reverb might be helpful in this case to help sustain things, or it could be distracting. So I'm going to turn the reverb off. I should say I use a reverb pedal right now. My main amp is a early 60s deluxe Fender Deluxe amp that doesn't have reverb. So I sometimes use a pedal made by JHS, little shout out to Josh and my friends at JHS Pedals. I use their Alpine reverb, which is a nice box. So now I'm going to do the same thing without reverb. It's a little bit easier to hear the beating without the reverb, I think. And then you could also do that on your second and third string, and you could do a similar exercise. It doesn't have to be G major. It could be a different key. It could be a different mode. For example, if you wanted to do A Dorian, well, no, let's not do that because it's going to be the same notes. Let's say A Lydian. So that's nice. That's a nice example because we have our open A string as a reference. So. So if you don't know what did I say A Lydian? That's what I was playing, was A Lydian. If you don't know the modes, don't worry about it. That's not really the point here. The point is pick a scale. It could even be a pentatonic scale. It could be, A minor pentatonic. And in that case, you might want to, instead of bending scale steps, you could try bending just notes of the well, it would be scale steps, pentatonic scale steps, but it wouldn't necessarily all be half steps and whole steps. So what I mean is, if you think of the A minor pentatonic here, you'd bend, that's a whole step. And remember, I'm checking the pitch of this against the pitch of this and make sure this one is not bent. So you might want to do this in front of a full-length mirror if you have one, some way that you could really get a straight-on view and make sure you're not bending. Now when you get to this one, you have to bend A all the way up to C. And then C up to D, D up to E. And then you don't have to necessarily always be doing bends to a unison. Once you get the hang of this, you could try bending to a scale step away. So if I want to hear the notes A and G, I'd play A. I'll go back to the key of G major. So I've got F sharp. So if I want to hear A and G together in the key of G, I will bend. And somebody's driving by with a loud radio. Thank you, neighbor. You could do something like this. So I'm bending F sharp to G, and then I have F sharp, G, A. E up to F sharp. So I'm getting the sound of 3 scale steps in a row by going Do, Re, Mi. So Do, bend to Re. Now here, this is an unsupported bend. Just because of where it is, it's hard to get any other fingers really in play there. So that's kind of like fake pedal steel licks, and those sound, I think, better with reverb. And there's all kinds of combinations you could do. You could bend up into a third. It occurred to me one thing I didn't mention earlier is if you don't have a pitch reference like a recording or a looper pedal or something like that, another way is to just turn on your tuner and practice bending and eyeball it on your tuner, and your tuner will tell you, it'll tell you if you are in tune. That's what a tuner does. So you could make up your own exercises. There's nothing really, and not to say that this is the only way to do this kind of thing, but it is a way. The main thing, of course, that I want to emphasize is that you bend in tune. And, anytime you're bending, it's not just hit a note and bend away from the note, but bend into a note. So think about where you're going, as much as, or even more, think about where you're going more than where you're coming from. The starting note sometimes doesn't even register to anyone listening. Your fingers know where they're starting, but to somebody listening, they're probably going to focus on where you arrive much more than where you start from. So I mentioned at the beginning of this tip that some tips are short, 5-minute bits, and some are longer. This is already a longer one. I'm going to wrap it up in a minute here, but I just wanted to say, once you get the hang of that, and you could do it on all your strings, I can't really do it too much on my second and third string. I use a wound third, and it's pretty heavy, and it doesn't lend itself to big bends, but you could do some. But anyway, once you get the hang of it, start to play real melodies. I'm going to now play Happy Birthday, just because it's a dumb, easy song, and everybody seems to know it. So instead of playing some song that nobody knows, I'll play a song that hopefully everybody knows. So I'll be in the key of F, and I'll try and do it with a lot of bends. Double bend there. I'll stick with the simple stuff. pretty in tune. Let me try it one more time. That's a pre-bend. I bent the E up to F and I never sounded the E. You don't hear the E until I release it. So people call that a pre-bend. There are some double bends that you can do that are fun to play, but I'll save those for when I'm better warmed up. I'll show you one of my pet licks that I do a lot in kind of bluesy situations. It's a double stop bend lick. Maybe you can use this if you get a cool lick out of this. Maybe that's a good thing. So if you're in F, I'm going to think about this two-note bluesy kind of double stop thing. Double stop just meaning two notes at a time. I'm not literally using a double stop technique. But instead of playing these like that, I'll do it with a bend using just one shape with these two fingers. So that's all thinking of like F. And I'm bending this is 8th fret, 9th fret, get to tiny bend. And then I'm playing 10 and 11, no bend or microscopic bend. And then the last one at 11th fret and 12th fret gets a half step. So half step, little or no bend, half step. And again, that's mimicking this, but with bends. And I'll show you one other lick that you could have fun with on a double bend. What the heck? It's my show. We can go over 20 minutes if I want to. So now I'm going to still be in F, and I want to bend E flat and G up to F and A. That's hard. I'm trying to do the same. I'm trying to get this. So E flat and G up to F and A, and then C and E flat up to D and F. And if you're using a plain third, this is a lot easier. But with a wound third and a plain second, they just don't bend quite the same way. But well, that's a way to do it. So I'm bending here with my ring finger, but I'm supporting with my first finger, so I get a little extra leverage. Anyway, longest guitar tip to date: bend in tune, bend in tune, bend in tune, bend in tune. Thank you so much for guitar tips. I am Adam Levy. Stay tuned, stay bent, and take good care.